And just a second. If you would like to hear, just a minute.
I'm an architect and a priest. And I worked as a construction designer, a building designer, but also a construction supervisor.
Right.
And because I worked in construction supervision, I could not tell anyone that I was a priest, because they're hard enough, contractors are hard enough to deal with anyway as a woman. So I did not say anything. And I had been looking since I retired in 16, I've been looking for a way to combine the two, because it was kind of weird having one life here, one life there, not combining the two.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing it little at a time, and this was, for me, the beginning of my whole life, the whole holistic life, because now I can do both.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
This is how we started. If I can get my embouchure going here. Like a call. Mm-hmm. It sounds almost like a shofar. And to focus everybody and get everybody, notice how everybody came right away and stood in a circle.
That's a good thing to do.
And here is this wetland that's being destroyed, part of creation. I'm a Christian, I believe in God, and I believe it's part of our job to take care of this, as does Gabriella for that same. So Gabriella put together a whole group of readings from various people who have been working on this issue. A woman in Guatemala who worked and said that we have
it
to...
was Honduras, it was Berta Casares.
Guatemala. And all of these people who have given of themselves, of their lives in some cases, to save the environment. And we're at this point now.
We talked about, well, in the beginning, I wanted it to be an ecumenical service. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking for people, faith leaders from different communities. And at short notice, at summertime, it was really difficult. So I put together things from different traditions, and we opened with the Muslim call to prayer. That's what we opened with. It was
after the conch.
After the conch, yeah, which was perfect. So we opened with that, and we had other readings and music from different traditions also.
Daniel Berrigan.
Well, one of the music, it's beautiful. It comes from Brazil, and it was people praying in the street. The music was playing loud in the street. People were kneeling and praying right on the sidewalk while they were playing this music. It was during the pandemic, so we had that playing also. And then we had readings, but kind of their lives of Berta Casares. We had Ken Saro-Wiwa from Nigeria, about his life. Both of them were murdered. And Ken Saro-Wiwa was the government as well as Shell Oil. And we didn't say this in that, but the Shell Oil were polluting so badly that there were children, if they were running around in the street, they would come back with oil up to their knees, you know. And we had, who else did we have?
People who were included. I'm trying to think who that other one was. The Native American, the indigenous woman. We just honored her. She was one of the people that
there were four people that we talked about. Kateri Tekawitha. We had, I outlined those four because we were going to incorporate them into the Litany of Saints. And when we did the Litany of Saints, it was really like towards the end of the Vigil. We had everybody with candles, and we lit the candles, and then we went into the chant of the Litany of Saints, and that Kateri Tekawitha was part of that also.
I think it was beautiful. And then afterwards, people were invited to come up and speak. Michael talked about, he had gotten this little book about what a wetland is. You know, basically, it's wet land. It absorbs water. He said, I want to get this book and give it to everybody from Cuomo on down. You know, they need to know what a wetland is. They look at this as worthless land. You can take the trees down and build on it. They don't know its value. Each of these trees are going to come out. Each of these trees absorbs so much of the CO2. And we breathe out oxygen that we don't need. They need but the vice versa, the carbon dioxide we don't need in oxygen that they give. So we live symbiotically. And they take all these impurities out of the air, like the refineries. There are all refineries in New Jersey. The air blows this way, and there's all those toxics in the air. all the flames, the particles from the west coast right now, the trees are helping decrease that amount in the air. So each one of these, there's no way man could make one of these things and do the things that each one tree does.
One of the things
moisture in the summertime.
Yeah. One of the things that we did in highlighting these people, one of the people that we highlighted, all right, Ken Sarawiwa and Bert Casades were both martyred. So we talked about the martyrs in our movement and whose shoulders we stand on. And one of the people we highlighted also is currently alive, and that was Steve Danziger, who is currently in really bad shape because he was a lawyer who protected the people in Brazil, I think it was. And no, it wasn't Brazil. What country was it? I don't know. Anyway, he sued. It wasn't Shell Oil. City. He sued one of the oil companies. I don't remember which. And they won in the court in whatever country it was. I don't remember. Anyway, I can give you. Want to look? He sued them, and they won $9 billion for the indigenous people who were getting sick, who were getting cancer, who were getting all kinds of illnesses, and the children because of the pollution from the refineries. And he won all of that money, but then whichever company it was, let me see if I can find it. And he's currently struggling with this. Dorothy Stang was another one of the martyrs that we presented. Steve's Chevron. It was Chevron back then, but now it's somebody else. But it was Chevron in.
I think Shell bought it, but I'm not sure.
Ecuador. Yeah, it was Ecuador, and they won in Ecuador courts. They won $9 billion. But Chevron took them to court in New York. And the court said that they can't use the finding in Ecuador because there's all kinds of corruption there, like there's none here. And so he was censored. He lost his license, his law license, and they're suing him. And the court's found in Chevron's favor, and now he has to pay all of the fees for Chevron, and as if he is the problem. So those are people that we highlighted. So those are the prophets we talked about, the martyrs, the prophets, the ancestors, and then we incorporated those names into the Litany of Saints.
And so what you had said in the flyer is that you're going to be having additional demonstrations and protests.
Yes, that's why I wanted a prayer service, because this marks the beginning of a more intense protest, and we wanted to mark it with prayer.
We may be going into some form of nonviolent direct action.
Yeah.
We're exploring that.
We're going into many areas. We've done tons of investigation of the people.
Gabriella has been working on this for 4 years. You know, we've looked at organizations, people who are rich, wealthy, billionaire might want to buy it, asking Cuomo to take it with eminent domain.
And then networking also with all kinds of environmental organizations.
So this was actually a city park at one time, right?
It was a city property.
Oh, city property,
Yeah,
okay.
but in 1975, when there was a fiscal crisis, they sold it to the developer.
Right.
Now, the developer bought Old Place Creek, the tidal wetland, first. How do you sell a creek? How do you sell a property like that for somebody to build on? The second property that they bought, I believe, was after the law was passed to protect the freshwater wetlands. The second property was this. And they bought it after the law was passed.
BJ's is leasing it.
Since 2011, they've been their anchor tenant. Before any permits were given, since 2011. So the freshwater wetland here is the second property bought, and they tried to propose to DEC. They had a freshwater wetland appeal board that was just instituted, and it sounds to me like it was just instituted for this developer, because they appealed to them for hardship because they weren't going to make a profit on their property. That's hardship. I feel sorry for them, right? They buy a property underwater, and then they feel that they should get a hardship ruling and make a profit on it. But that's what they did, and so Freshwater Wetland Appeal Board gave them a permit, or that they approved of this hardship claim, and then they tried to submit projects to DEC all through the years. DEC always rejected it until 2012, and during that time, Governor Cuomo changed the commissioner. The commissioners were always saying no to the developer. Changed the commissioner, who said yes, and DEC threatened to bring this developer threatened to bring DEC to court. And rather than going to court, DEC settled out of court 2 months before Hurricane Sandy. And the settlement was that they could build here, but they couldn't build in the tidal wetland. That was the settlement. And it was 2 months before Hurricane Sandy, where 24 plus people died on Staten Island. Half the people that died in Hurricane Sandy died on Staten Island. And I believe it was much more than 24.
And were you guys, as you were going along with this procedures and legal proceedings, were you expecting them to just gate it up and start cutting it down, or were you hoping that they wouldn't?
I don't think this is legal.
Well, there was an injunction,
I don't think this,
right? We were waiting for an injunction.
Well,
So what's happening? What's behind the fence now? What have they done so far?
this fence, I don't think is legal. And why are they getting everybody's approving things that are wrong? A chain link fence, and I know as an architect and as construction supervisor, it's supposed to be wood. Construction's a fence is supposed to be wood, and you have to submit the details of its construction to the building department. Now, what happens here is that a chain link fence is only allowed when a developer or a contractor is stalled in the middle of a project, is stalled for a year, 2, 3 years. Then they can put up a chain link fence because the people on the outside can monitor if there's anything going on behind that, vandalism, etc. But as soon as they start construction back again, they have to go to wood. So why did DOB approve this? And then when they were working on South Avenue, Jack, one of our people, photographed the permits. The permits have to be put on the fence, and photographed them and sent them to me. And there was no permit for the fence. There was no permit, and because they're on South Avenue also, and probably the fence on Forest Avenue would apply also, they needed a permit not only from DOB, but they also needed a permit from DOT, Department of Transportation, because they were building in the street.
So they should be being fined every day that's up? Is that how it should work? Or
It should be, but who knows, because they've been approved for everything that's wrong. A friend who lives on South Avenue took a picture, sent it to me. The workers were working in the street. The only protection they had was red cones, and 2 or 3 of them. That's it. That was the only protection. They had a bobcat in the street. Somebody turning the corner could hit the bobcat, and who knows what kind of damage that would cause. So I called 311, and I told them that I complained that there's no permit for the fence, that they should have had a permit from DOT as well as DOB, and there's no permit for that, and that they were being endangered. They had no protection. One person, there were probably about 6, one person had a heart attack, just one. So they were not being protected. And so they said they would send somebody right away. And then one of the members called DOT and complained there too because there was no permit. And they said that they would come right down. And the workers disappeared like that. Just right after that, they disappeared.
so nothing's been done recently here?
Well, when they came, probably they didn't see anything because the workers disappeared.
But I think they were chipping the trees.
There are chopped down trees.
There's a
all
tree
along
down,
there.
and then they're putting them through a chipper. I understand. I didn't see it, but Michael was talking about that.
Yeah,
You can see them behind them.
So
Yeah.
how much of the woodland has been already cut down at this point?
I haven't been there recently on Dwarf Street, but Jack was saying that 1/3. I don't think it's that much yet. We still are in court. We've been in court for 2 years.
Have you appealed the
Yes.
refusal of the
Well,
injunction?
It goes
or?
back because we have not been able to state the merits of the case that will be flooded, etc., because they've been keeping us busy with technicalities. The last ruling, that the appeal that we have now, the last ruling was that we didn't file on time because we were told that it was 4 months. We had 4 months to file, and we got it in before that, but we found out that DEC in some cases has a statute of limitations of 30 days. And so the developer complained that we should be dismissed, the case should be dismissed right away because we missed the deadline. So we waited for that ruling, and we found out that they ruled in his favor for the deadline, but they ruled in our favor because DEC did not do a public hearing, and which we could have had experts, and they did not do. They did not give us a new EIS. The one from the city, the environmental impact statement, one from the city is false. It's fraudulent. It's false. When I went to architecture school, Pratt, I learned that for an EIS you had to compare the project that they wanted to build to no project, so that you would actually know the effect on the community. Well, they compared the one they wanted to build to a slightly smaller one, and so there was no effect. No effect on traffic. They said no effect on traffic. With 18 acres of shopping and 800 cars, 835 cars, there's going to be no effect on traffic. And what about the trucks that are making deliveries? You can't cross South Avenue now. It's fast, lights are short, people speed, and there's no effect on traffic. No effect on aesthetics.
What about the fact that up in Arlington there's a woodland, but you can't go in it because it's been, it's like there's some kind of pollution there.
Yeah.
So people in this area don't really have.
We don't have a park, and that's far away anyway. We don't have a park. We don't have another open green space at all. And let me finish with the law stuff. So they found that they found in our favor about the public hearing, etc. But they said we should have complained in 2017. Now that was last year, 2020, that we had that finding. But we should have complained 3 years ago.
And I think you had mentioned on the phone that the community wasn't informed about the project. So
Lack
how
of
would you have known in
completely.
2017?
Yeah. So we filed an appeal of the 2017 issue. We filed the appeal on March 1st, and then on March 19th we filed an injunction, which was supposed to be to stop the work, which was supposed to be. The finding was supposed to come in by May 1st. We didn't get it until the middle of June. So in the meantime, they were still working. The appeal that we have right now is not going to stop them because it's about the 2017, not about the work. If we win the 2017 ruling, who knows when that's going to come in, we can file on the basis of the merits of the case, that we're going to be flooded, that we don't have protection from all these planes and pollution and the refineries across the way and all of that.
So the injunction that you tried to file, the judge actually rejected it, or
Yes.
just said it wasn't appropriate?
He said it was, no, they rejected it.
They waited a long time though. They didn't get it in as soon as they could have, which was a little moment of hopefulness, right?
But, well, that was, they got it in June, and this work started shortly before July 4th. And that's probably typical, because it's the summertime, everybody goes away for the July 4th weekend, and so nobody was going to pay attention. So that's when they started this.
And I guess once they've cut down all the trees, then in their minds, then the battle is over.
Well, what they did too over December, because last December, DOB, Department of Buildings, gave them the permission to clear the land, which means cut down the trees, and rough grade, which means take the roots out. And so last December, that's what they were doing in part of this. And then they stopped. They took the backhoe, the one with the treads, and they went back and forth close to the trees. Now this is a very heavy piece of equipment. They're back and forth over the roots, the soil in the tree, and around the roots, which means that the soil is going to be compacted, and so the trees are going to suffocate. So even the ones that were alive are going to have a hard time surviving. Now, I worked for the park department for 23 years as an architectural designer and construction supervisor, and I know that the tree roots have to be compacted or they'll die. They have to be decompacted. So, I mean, they were doing everything to get there right. So right now we're waiting for the appeal, and then we have to put in another appeal after that. Our lawyer has said recently that if they continue doing this and we win both appeals, that they will have to pay for all the damages.
So how does that translate into like reforesting? Well,
They'll have to pay for trees to put in. Now it's not going to be the same thing because mature trees sequester much more carbon and they also absorb more water. one mature tree will absorb 100 gallons of water per day and evaporate it. So if we lose 1,800 trees, that's 180,000 gallons of water per day. That's a lot of water from a flood. And we were told by NOAA that, yeah, if we lose this, we'll be flooded. That this saved us during Hurricane Sandy from being flooded.
So what's the next step, basically?
We're going to do more active demonstrating. We've been investigating every area we were doing. We're writing to Cuomo again. We're demanding now. We're not asking anymore. We're demanding. We have a couple of projects. One of which is to take the pledge not to shop at BJ's or any subsidiary of BJ's, and we are going to send that to the CEO and the CFO of BJ's, and we are also going to send it to the governor and the mayor because they will lose taxes if nobody shops there. They'll lose taxes. So, and we'll also send it to their staff because they probably won't pick it up. The mayor and governor probably won't pick it up. So we'll send it to their staff. And that's some of the things that we're doing. We're also shaming BJ's because BJ's also has a website that talks about how good a neighbor they are. They have another website that talks about how good they are for the environment. And look what they're doing.
Yeah, in this instance, it looks like a good number of the residents around here aren't really interested in having BJ's, right?
Yeah, no. If you want to go to BJ's, it's right across the bridge.
Yeah.
And there's Costco here anyway.
Yeah. So when you said like direct activism and stuff, are there any other options outside of legal? Like you had mentioned asking people to purchase the property. Like that just didn't end up panning out?
No, didn't.
No one wants it?
A billionaire file. People want billionaires.
Did they say what price they like? Do they have a price that they'll take, or I mean?
Well, we had somebody get to the lawyer, and ask if they would be willing to sell if somebody was willing to pay for it. And he said he would run it past them, but we never heard after that. Now, the politicians here, our state senator, could have initiated eminent domain. Our state assembly member could have initiated the eminent domain, and he did not.
And were either of those politicians in favor of your?
We went to Diane Savino, who is the state senator. Very early on, we went to her 3 times. She was very interested in how much it was going to cost us for flooding insurance. And I got her those numbers. We had a professional calculate the numbers, and I got it for her, and then she said she'll support us. She did write a letter to DEC for us. We had to provide DEC with a reasonable number of letters asking for a public hearing. We provided 1,700 letters, and they came back and said it's not warranted. Public hearing is not warranted.
So customarily, what percentage of the population would they say is warranted like that?
They never said. Reasonable, what does that mean?
Do you have any records of any public hearings that have actually happened?
Since that time?
Or before that time, in New York City in general?
As the commissioner
DEC
changed, it might have changed.
So basically, in terms of what you had said with Diane Savino, she would have had the capacity to do eminent domain, but she did not want to.
Legislature. And Michael Cusick also, when we visited him too, we visited many of these guys, and he could have also initiated eminent domain. One started in, I don't know, it's probably like Congress where one has to go first and then the next one, so. But neither one of them did that. The numbers that I got for flooding insurance, and this was somebody who calculated the numbers during Hurricane Sandy on the South Shore. She did that. So I drove around the neighborhood, and she was asking me questions. For instance, do the houses have basements? Because if they have basements, then it would be more expensive, the insurance. Because the mechanicals are generally in the basement, they would get trashed. How tall are the buildings? I calculate that as I did in construction. By a door is generally 7 feet, and if you can see how many doors there are up to the building, up the height of the building, then you can know how tall it is. So I gave her all of that information as we walked around. Where I'm living in City West, right across the street, right across South Avenue, We are slab on grade. The unit is right on a concrete slab. We don't have a basement because it's built on a wetland. My interior insurance, the interior alone, is going to cost $2,000 a year for interior alone. For our association, it will cost between $200,000 and $400,000 a year,
So
which will bankrupt us, and we won't be able to afford the maintenance fees. And what will happen? Who knows? Gentrification, probably. And there is a mobile home park right over here, and these are elderly, disabled, and low-income people, and some people who survived Sandy on South Shore. And their insurance will have to be, depending on their elevation, it will have to be between $8,000 and $32,000 a year. Yeah, for poor people.
And they don't have, and because they don't have basements, they don't have sump pumps, or do you have a sump pump in the houses in
I don't have
City
it.
West?
In the ones that have basements, it would be wise to have a sump pump, but who knows? If we have a really bad flood, it goes in the basement, their hot water heater, their boiler, their air conditioning, and everything's trashed.
But as far as like when you're when you're on the slab and you don't have a basement, you can't really use a sump pump. That doesn't really have
Well,
any
it
place to
doesn't
go.
cost as much insurance because you're not having all of this machinery. But the machinery is on the first floor, which in my case is right off the curb. It's the same level as the curb.
So I believe in the past we had contacted Debbie Rose's office, and their claim was that the new owner is gonna like do all this mitigation stuff.
We foiled the documents. Debbie Rose said none of this water that's coming off of, the mitigation and the bioswales and the retention pond is not going into the storm sewers. But you know what? I can read drawings, construction drawings, and there's a section through the bioswales, and there's a pipe inside. Where's that pipe going? There's another pipe inside the retention pond. Where's that pipe going? In addition to which, that retention pond is being built within the buffer zone, which is not supposed to be anything now. And they were concerned about it being stagnant water. Now, if it's percolating into the soil, which is what it's supposed to do, it wouldn't be stagnant. So then they were talking about an aerator. And an aerator is a piece of electrical equipment in a buffer zone.
And Debbie Rose had also said that she said something like that it's a food desert here, and we need the BJs more than they need the wetland, and that the BJs is not going to cause anything like any kind of flooding or anything because they're going to make everything so great and it all looks
How
good
does she
on
know
paper.
It's 8 feet off the curb before the building comes out of the ground. So when water from Newark Bay comes this way, it's not going to go into BJ's. It's going to go around the mountain and come into the community homes.
Oh, so BJ's is going to be 8 feet over the grade of the
Correct.
pavement and everything?
Now, I couldn't find the exact numbers because they didn't have them there, which is very unusual. You have to show in the elevation of the drawing of the building how high it is off the curb.
So all the water that they're diverting to the community around them, they're higher up than everybody else.
BJ's.
They will be.
Yes. Yeah, and all the water that's coming from there will ultimately go out into the sewer treatment plant, which was supposed to be a lifespan of 35 years, and it's now over 60 years old. So every time somebody builds, and this is a combined sewer, which means black water and gray water go in there, and that goes out into the sewer treatment plant. We have a heavy rain, more raw sewage is going to go into the harbor. Every time you build something else without considering that, more during a heavy rain, more will go into the harbor. That's why they closed the beaches recently.
So Staten Island over time has been overdeveloped, and the proof of that is if you take a highway, we really can't accommodate the number of people with cars at this point. So this is what's gone on for like 40 or 50 years. Do you think that if this stops, this might be a trend of people on Staten Island being more active about?
I hope so. I really hope so. When I was at Pratt, I took a course in urban development. and the professor had a developer come into the class, and he told us that he bought a big piece of property in New Jersey, farmland, and got to the zoning board. And I said to him, that sounds like manifest destiny of the developer. And what happens when you come to the end of the land? And he said, by that time you and I won't be around, and after that, who cares? Who cares? I don't know if he had children or not. But the problem is that we have now come to the end of the land. Most of the other boroughs don't have land anymore. You have to tear something down to build something up. So Staten Island still has land. So now they're building where they never built before. They're building in wetlands, on beaches, and cemeteries.
We also read about a planned urban area south of the Goethals Bridge on the wetland.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like a city. They were calling it Staten Island City. Do you know anything about that? Or
I don't, but I know that when they were building the new bridge, they had to do archaeological research or investigation in that area, and they came up with a lot of artifacts, indigenous people artifacts. This
so
was a hunting ground.
there were most likely artifacts that were destroyed.
Could be. Although this is not really old growth, it was disturbed. So may not, it was more likely there, but who knows? And I was involved in the destruction of Mount Marissa too. And there had to be artifacts in there, because there were artifacts when they were building the street, they found artifacts. They found the body of a woman with an arrow in it. So there had to be artifacts. So I tried to call people to find out what our rights were, to find out. They said if they could, and they were putting everything in the dumpster. They said you can't look at the dumpster unless they put it out on the street. So who knows what we lost.
And as far as what you said about the backhoes going over the tree roots, how would that be mitigated? How would that be repaired?
Decompaction.
What is a different machine that looks like a backhoe and
Well,
different?
you could use an air gun, make holes with the air gun all around the roots, and then you put softer, more fertile kinds of soil within those holes, and that spreads over time and it decompacts the roots.
So this is like an urgent matter then, because as they proceed, the damage they do in only a few days would take a lot of time and money and effort to fix. So what's the fastest way to basically halt this at this point?
A stop work order from the governor.
Is there anyone else who could give a stop work order?
Not that
Because
I
it
know
doesn't
of.
seem like he's very friendly to.
No, he's not. He's not. He's for this. And so is the borough president, sorry. The borough president wants this destroyed. We couldn't get a meeting with him.
And what
He ran
about
away from us.
what about? I think it was Vito Fasella. Is he in favor of this as well, or have you
We
spoken
haven't
to
approached
him?
him, so I don't know. The other way to stop it would be eminent domain, and that's up to the state people.
All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. And
No problem. I would stay anytime because this is important.
So were there a lot of people from the community here earlier tonight?
There were about 20. There were a lot of new people. Yeah.
There should really be a lot more people, because this is going to affect a lot of people's lives. Why do you think that there weren't more people?
One of the things that we spoke about is one of the profits of environmental land protection is that one of the scientists said that he thought that they could reverse climate change through science, through mitigating carbon, through a number of other ways. But he said he realized that it's more like people have to change their attitude. They have to become more engaged. They can't be apathetic. And he said that scientists that people have to become more spirit-centered and more conscious of these things. And he said that science is not good at that.
So Pope Francis said all this stuff in the last year or two about the environment and how it's actually a moral obligation for people to be mindful of these things. how does that translate to like the average person, or even let's say like, okay, the average Catholic or Christian or spiritual person? Do they make that connection at this point, do you think?
Well, first of all, a lot of this community didn't know. I didn't find out about this, and this had been years in the making. I didn't find out about this until 2017, June of 2017. After city planning was already underway, and the following week after, I went there, but I couldn't testify because I didn't know a thing about it. In fact, I followed Debbie Rose a long time for her speeches, for her State of the Union, for her debates when she was reelected, and I went there, and somebody asked, was this community informed about what was happening here? And she said she told Gabriella. That's how she informed the community. She told me. There was no flyers in the doors, or when they want to be reelected or voted for, there's many flyers in the doors. So, but there was nothing in the doors.
What about this being just bad press for BJ's? As you said, that they're interested in having an image of being, centered around the communities that they have their stores in.
I found an article that talked about how bad BJ's is for the community. We are going to have support now from DC 37. It's in the works. The Committee on the Environment just approved it, and now it's going to the people of DC 37. So we're having their support also. So we have a lot of support, but they just ignore it. They just ignore it. We had, and by the way, city planning that put out, that was the first step in that I didn't know and I couldn't testify. They put out a flood risk mapper that says that we're at risk of flooding as of last year, 2020. We're at risk of flooding right now.
And then this is going to make that issue worse.
Yeah.
Do you expect that if they do develop this land, that there would then be a new flood map, or wait until another storm for that kind of thing to happen?
FEMA maps are from 1983. They haven't been renewed.
Still going. Wow, this is a long video. How long are you already?
I think 37
They haven't been
minutes.
renewed since then. Or they put it out again, but it was the same thing.
What do you want?
The FEMA maps.
The what?
The FEMA maps we're talking about. Yeah. And so
I know we after Hurricane Sandy, they had rezoned some of the, especially like this area where it hadn't flooded before, and then it became part of the flood zone. Did that affect the community already in terms of having to buy flood insurance, or they haven't really had to buy flood insurance
well, people
yet?
have mixed feelings about that, because if they have to buy flood insurance, it's going to be sky high. So they do and they don't want the new maps to come out. So it's a risk, because if they flooded, they're not covered by anybody. But if there's new maps come out and the payment is sky high, nobody's going to pay it.
So what other arguments are there besides the flooding? Just because, let's say that they dismiss that and say that the flooding is not an issue, what other ways could you approach this legally?
Well, what the issues are first is that tree is sequester, and forest wetland soil, which is loose and spongy, sequesters carbon. So by cutting this down, they're putting more carbon in the air, which is going to increase the risk of the climate change effects. So they're creating more carbon, more climate change effects.
But the DEC said this isn't a wetland.
That's illegal. That's a legal argument.
Legally, also, when you look at, for example, here in New York State, the CLCPA, and you look at Governor Cuomo, for example, who put out a bond act restoring Mother Earth, but then after the pandemic, that was withdrawn, but then it's come out with a new name. So he himself would kind of look like a big environmental person. Now, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabriella, but this initially was protected by the DEC. This wetland was protected from being cut down. And then they got a new commissioner. And then that new commissioner removed, or Cuomo wanted the protection of it removed. So I don't know why it has been, but that's one of the reasons why we're encouraging everybody to call Governor Cuomo. He's the only person right now who can stop this. as far as we know. He could put a stop work order. He could put a moratorium on it. He has the capability of doing that. And I know Gabriella asked de Blasio. He hasn't done
I spoke to him
anything.
personally.
Yeah.
They were saying that it's not a wetland. And Len Garcia Duran, who was our representative for the city planning, there was a resource fair, it was a town hall meeting with the mayor. And they were going around the room calling up people for questions. I saw the pattern that they were using, and I got in the place where the next person would be asked a question. And so I was called on. And I said, remember that issue about the wetland, that whatever. And then Len Garcia Duran jumped up and said, it's not a wetland. And I said, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. The mayor rolled his eyes and said, next. So I got a picture, the picture that's all over the internet.
You want to get the pictures out? Oh, they're in the trunk,
You
right?
probably saw it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in our
the
last
water,
article too.
yeah. And that's right here. So I got a huge copy of that from my phone, and I rolled it up, and I went to the resource fair where he was going to appear. The person doing triage, it was a very long line. The person doing triage, what's your issue? All of that. She came to me and she said, what's the issue? And I told her this, and I showed her the picture, and I said, that's saying it's not a wetland. She said, this is important. I got to get you to be the first one. So she put me first. So I got to speak to him, and I said, remember the wetland that you called it's not a wetland? And I unrolled the poster, big, and he said, wow, that's impactful. Then he called over the commissioner of city planning.
There's water there.
Can't go about that in a wetland. There's water. So he called over the commissioner of city planning, and he called over the director of resilience and asked them to explain. The commissioner of city planning double speaking. He didn't understand what she was saying, and I didn't either, but he let her get away with it. And then the director of resilience said, we're looking into it, but I've heard her say that a number of times. She's not looking into it.
I think a problem with some people might be, and I know we did a webinar on wetlands, and
Catherine is from Sierra Club.
this is called a forested wetland. Like a lot of people think of a wetland as like kind of a swampy thing with cattails growing and everything. They look at this, they see a forest. So unless they knew scientifically that it's possible, they may not realize that this is a wetland. It looks like a forest. A forested wetland is one of several types of wetlands, 3 or 4 or 5. So if people aren't knowledgeable or they don't take the time to educate themselves, I mean, I can understand how somebody would look at it. They're not going to be a wetland. There are trees growing there. You know, they don't think of trees as being a place where you would have a wetland, where that, you know, if it's a wetland, the trees would be growing like a forest. So I think to some extent that's understandable. However, when you come in and you walk through or you look at it, especially in the spring after the rains come, for example, the turtles, the salamander, have you ever heard peepers in the spring? These little tiny frogs and they sing. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound in the spring. And then they come and they lay their eggs because these vernal ponds are not continuous. They're only there for a period of time. So fish don't live there. So their eggs are safe. Turtles lay their eggs. Frogs lay their eggs. They're not going to be eaten by fish because it's not a, you know, year-round body of water. It's a sometimes body of water. Some of them stay longer than others. So like there's a whole biology, there's a whole ecology to the system. And what was it? Something like over 28 species of birds call this, they either visit it or call it home. And someone took a beautiful, I wish I had shown the picture of the owl.
Did I send that to you?
Yeah.
The baby owl?
Yeah, the baby great horned owl. And we kind of made a little story about it, and the mother was there, and kind of Olivet, and then Oliver, the father, who wasn't there.
And the baby was Ollie.
Right. And like, their home could be next.
Yeah. So,
a tree with that nest.
What have some successful efforts like this been on Staten Island that worked? I know that they didn't build the highways through the Greenbelt because of
I think it was Lindsay who did that, right? Was it Lindsay who was in
I'm not sure.
So you're asking what stopped it?
What has been successful so far on Staten Island? Like,
Catch Camp was saved. I don't know how they did it. But other than that, I don't know of anything that's been saved. And there is an intense upping of the stressors that they're putting on Staten Islanders. At the same time, because how many things can you find at the same time? They're dredging the Kilgan coal, widening it, dredging, but they're not going to remediate all the toxins in it first. When we're flooded, and the people in Richmond Terrace have been flooded, so all those toxins that they're not remediating are going to go into people's homes, and that includes uranium. Uranium was stored under the Bayonne Bridge since World War II, and they're not remediating. So there are things that are going on the east side. There are things that are going on over here. There are things that are going on in the mid-island on the west side. And the zoning people are now saying that they're improving things. Watch out for that. They're saying that they're recommending that a private homeowner does not have to go to any agency besides the building department. If you own less than 1 acre, you don't have to go to any agency but the building department. Now, the 10 properties together, that's quite a lot of land, right? You don't have to go to an agency to see what impact you have on anything else. Crazy. It got defeated last year, and guess what? It was brought back this year. So all of these things are going on at the same time, and how do you fight all of this?
And actually, I believe it was last week or the week before, we had republished an article about what's going on in Oregon and California with the wildfires. But not just the wildfires, there's preserves over there, but the preserves that have no water, they have no fish, so the birds are going to come there to get the fish that would normally be there because the water's supposed to be there, but it's all been diverted to farms and communities.
Golf courses.
And golf courses. So the birds are all going to die because they're going to come to find the fish, and the fish are not going to be there. So it kind of goes up the food chain in that regard. And that's human-made. Another human-made thing.
It's not only that, in California, they were using thousands of gallons of fresh water to frack a well. It takes, over 10,000 gallons of water, and that was water that wasn't going to the home farms and to the lettuce growers,
not only that.
So it's been a very poor use of water. Very poor. Who is the we, by the way? We said we did a story on
StatenIslander.org, Staten Islander News Organization. It's us. I have our cards.
Oh yeah, I love a card. And I'd be interested in seeing what you do with this if possible.
Yeah. It'll be posted on our website, and then it'll go on our YouTube channel as well.
Thank you very much. Because
and I had actually republished something. We had republished something it's a paper called Mongolay Bay, and they do some environmental stories, and I thought that one was really kind of telling for what it happens when humans come in and do something that they say is going to be good for the environment, and it ends up being terrible.
There are a couple good papers. Sierra Club did a paper, What Happens When a Big Box Store Comes into a Community. And I didn't know it before I read the article, but a lot of times they are specifically built on wetlands because people think of wetlands as, this is a useless piece of land. Let's just build a big store. And also there was another article with BJ's has had trouble finding locations to build, right? Something recently about BJ's.
They're not a good neighbor, for one thing.
Yeah, and they have a statement about being a good neighbor and being good to the environment, and they really...
So why did they drag those tracks along the roots of the trees? Like what?
In order to kill the trees.
There's no...
If the trees go, they think we'll go away. We're not going
away. So that was basically...
I'm pretty sure it was...
like in terms of a practical purpose.
There's no practical purpose that they would do that?
No. I mean, DOP gave them the permission to clear the land and rough grade, which means taking up groups, cutting the trees and taking up groups. But they did not have to, so they did it in a certain location and then left it like that. They did not have to put the treads against the trunks of the tree sometimes. That's how close they were. And all of that weight on the roots, they wanted to kill it. I think it was intentional. And let me get back to California for a minute. It was not just a drought. They're depleting the aquifers.
Faster than they're getting replenished.
Yes.
Is that from farming, or is that from just like reservoirs?
Overuse. There's no conservation anywhere.
The same is true in the middle of the country. The Algonquin, I believe it is aquifer, with what the farmers really rely upon. And there's a Middle Eastern country, PBS did a big story on it, that they set up a whole area that people can't even get into, and they're using that water, and I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's not going to our farms. PBS had a big story on the uses of water.
So-
Anyway, we'll be looking forward to seeing this article. Are you videotaping this whole
So
thing?
what about like the major media outlets? Are they covering this at all, or?
Did any of them come tonight, or?
I contacted, but this was very short notice. We didn't have much time to plan this. So I contacted the Advance. We've had articles in Mainstream Review. We've had an article in the New York Times a couple years ago.
Do you find that they're usually favorable to your cause, or just
Yes.
kind of?
No, they were usually favorable. Yeah.
The one in New York Times, October 29th, I think 2019.
Yeah.
2019, it was really there 2 years ago. We did have a videographer here tonight with Environment TV, Charlie Olson, and he did a videotape.
Yeah, so nobody has really said they don't care about this. In fact, somebody contacted me from a media source and said, you've got so much, if you go to our website, you can see it, the articles. They asked me, how come, what's going on here that they've got so much coverage on this? Why is it that other people can't get coverage and you've got all of this?
All right. Do you have any other questions?
He's thinking of another.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of stuff.
My name's Catherine, by the way. What are
Don,
your names?
nice to meet you.
This is
What's your name?
Heather.
Heather and
Don.
Don.
And you're from the Sierra Club.
Yeah, I'm chair of the Sierra Club New York City group, and also a delegate to the chapter. That's the Untitled Chapter, is the New York State.
So maybe like, why isn't there more awareness of how green spaces affect people's development, especially kids?
It's not taught in schools. And a lot of times the kids teach the parents about these things when they learn it in school. And it's not being taught in schools. When I presented this issue to 111-year-olds, I think it was PS13, but I don't remember if that's the correct number or not. They were very interested in it, and they knew a lot because they had a teacher who was very interested in it. The teacher did a lot of programs with them, even started a Meatless Monday with them, and they didn't even know that. But I asked, at that time, one of my grandkids was 11, and I asked her, what are you learning in school? And she said nothing. She's not learning anything about it. And this is such a dire situation for kids because they're going to live in misery. They're going to have astronomical temperature numbers. You know, they're going to be extremely hot. They're not going to be able to breathe. They're going to be, and we lose this, and we have a heat island effect here. Without this, we're going to have an even more hot area than it is now. Look at this, blacktop, no trees.
Another reason, I think, to answer your question, Don, is that you've heard the saying, you love what you know. And if parents aren't taking to the children, their families, on hikes in the woods, or taking them out to the outdoors, there aren't as many schools. Some schools do have outings through the school, but it's very small. The Sierra Club has a big outings program. We try to get kids outdoors, but there isn't as much of that going on. I was very fortunate. There were 2 members in my father's side of the family who had farms, working farms. So as kids, myself and my sisters, we spent times, like we go for a week on my grandma's farm and, feed the chickens and weed the garden and take the cows to the field, to the pasture. So I grew up with all that, not realizing that it was any different from anybody else. My father would go for a walk in the woods and say, oh, here, chew on this twig. I said, chew on this twig, what is that? Birch bark. So he told me, what is birch bark? What is a birch tree? And he taught me different kinds, like a winterberry, and different things. Now, this looks like a winterberry, but it's not. You have to, and he taught me things. We walked through the woods, and he'd teach us. He'd teach us things, and what you know, you love. So I grew up with that as part of my life, and there aren't that many family farms anywhere.
Not only that, people don't have access to open spaces. And this is the thing. I worked for the park department for 23 years as an architectural designer and supervisor. And for a while, the park department was putting fences around the parks, and the kids couldn't go in there. And unless you go in there and explore and look at the bugs and the weeds and everything and learn names and touch them and smell them, if you don't allow children to fall in love with nature when they're little, they're not going to care about it when they're big.
Yeah, and I feel like there's things that parents themselves could do, even school teachers could do, like they could put like a worm farm in their backyard, and
Yes.
you get to see all the bugs and the worms and how it all works and all of that, and or a big composter even,
Right.
to watch it turn into black
That's it.
soil, and
I-
that that can introduce them to in a simple way that
Even on a
everybody
small
can do.
level, right? So they see interaction, a living thing, and how it
Right.
works.
Oh, there's bugs. The bugs aren't bad. Don't squish them.
Right.
That kind of
I used
thing.
to- I used
As
to
a
tell
teacher for 35 years, one of my students brought into class her aunt. She was doing a project. Her aunt had to hatch eggs, had to incubate eggs. Anyway, I ended up as our teacher getting these 2 baby ducks and 2 baby chickens. And the kids would draw them. I put newspapers down on the table, like if the baby ducks and the drawing. The kids named the 2 chickens Buckwheat and Barley, and I named the ducks Tittle and Tattle. And I had them in the art room for as long as I could. I let the kids take them out as a part of the playground. That was kind of walled off. It was not walled off, it was separate from the playground and stuff. It was very small fences. And I loved watching them run around the park. It was very unusual to have that situation. But the kids loved it. It was live. It was real. Just like when you take kids to a petting zoo or any zoo. They love animals. It's natural for them. So you're right. There are things that can be done in the classroom, even on a small scale. If you don't have a budget to go on a camping trip, a weekend, overnight camping, or you don't have buses to take them even for a hike in the woods, you can do something like that in the classroom. I agree with you entirely. That's a very good point. And there isn't enough of that going on, and I think it's going to be gone before we really get to save it. That's my fear.
Thank you.
We had this, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but we had this vigil tonight because it was important to start this new campaign with her. And a lot of people here tonight were very moved by it and felt almost healed because they were in heartache over this. And so we have to get more active.
So had this happened, let's say it does gain traction and a lot of people start to really consider these things. Had this happened like 30 years ago, Staten Island wouldn't look anything like this. Like
This used to be all wetland, I understand.
Yeah.
The whole North Shore was on
The
that.
whole west
The
side.
whole
Yeah.
the West Shore, like
Yeah.
Sharrett's Road, that kind of area, that was all wetlands. Now it's all, you can't even tell what it was 20 years ago. It just looks completely
And on
different.
this
Very
flood
sad.
risk mapper, the whole northwest coast by 2050 will be underwater, everything.
And can you think of too of what it's like for the animals? Like they used to be able to go to area, and this is like one isolated little pocket of trees. You know how that affects their life and their normal migration patterns. And
Well, even food patterns,
Exactly.
like where are the worms going to come from and the bugs and the, I don't know if you had heard about the scientists, like they put these things in parks and all around the country that like collect dead bugs, like it's like
they
a
can
trap, see how much
understand
bug
data.
mass.
Right.
And the bug mass has gone so much less from like 1970 when they started to now. It's like the bugs are, the population is
I know on Staten Island,
nothing.
lights like this used to have a lot of insects around them at nighttime.
You're right.
You'd see like tons,
See
like a
moths and
cloud.
different
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
and
That's very interesting though. I didn't know they were testing for the insects.
Well, it's just like something they've been testing since the 1970s, where they just
Yeah.
test mass, like they have like traps,
Yeah.
and they just calculate mass, and it's
Yeah.
a lot less now than because of all the pesticides and insecticides, and
Right.
they're not specific.
Right.
They don't just kill this or that; they kill every bug, except maybe a centipede or something.
Including the bees that feed us.
Right, exactly.
Butterflies and pollinators. I'm old enough to remember as a kid in the summertime, my father would take us to the park. There'd be bugs on the windshield. And there used to be a thing called a bug, I forget what it was called, it was shaped like a bee on the front of your car. So the bugs would go like this and they wouldn't land on your windshield. There were so many bugs. You come home and you'd be driving at
And now all
in
there
the
is
country.
mosquitoes.
Exactly.
Just
I mean, they were
mosquitoes.
all
So-
over the place, and frogs. And you'd see dead frogs in there. You wouldn't see that stuff anymore. So
And
you're right.
also these pesticides are so toxic. You know, and children sit in the grass and play with the grass and roll in the grass, and they get sick.
We didn't get sprayed tonight. You know they were supposed to spray for mosquitoes. You heard that, right?
Sometime before 6. It was
6:30 to something or other.
8:30 to 6 tomorrow night.
Yeah, so we were worried we were going to get sprayed while we're having this vigil, but we did not think it. But that's interesting to know that they're checking on the bug count as well.
So I see what you're saying about getting children to value like green spaces, but what about like, let's say, and then have the kids teach the adults? As far as the adults go, for them, I would think that the value of this for most people is just less traffic. I mean, you talked about the flooding. The flooding could be a serious issue, but like just something people think of every day is that it's going to take an extra, X amount of time to get from just local places because now you have another, big destination.
We can't cross South Avenue now as it is. We can't cross it. A child was killed by hit by a bus on South and Belfast Road, 13-year-old.
And with what you're saying, BJ's, I think they had planning an 800-car parking lot. something like that.
835 cars.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Dawn, is correct about having more cars, more of this, more pollution from the cars and everything else. So
It's like the more of the green spaces that they get rid of, that just means more buildings, more houses, more people. Like the project that they did on the highway, it didn't work. There's more traffic than there ever was, but now you can't get on the highway, so there's traffic on the service road and the highway, way worse than there was before. Like, so if you're in South Beach, if you're at South Beach and you want to come back and you want to get on the highway, you can't get on the highway until I think Clove Road. It's like you're just like, and it's a parking lot, the highway and the service road are both parking lots now. Whereas before it was just the highway that was a parking lot.
if it wasn't so sad, it would be funny. It still is a little funny.
And there's
But
a lot
it's
of-
like corporations, I'm sorry, Kevin, it's like corporations and industry are driving and making these decisions.
But
not only
ultimately,
that, the
I'm sorry.
politicians are lying to the people, and the people are not understanding what the truth is.
So the corporations, though, need the consumers to stay in business. So how do they maintain a favorable face while they do things like this? Like, how
The
does...
greenwashing is so powerful. People all the time. I mean, before I learned what greenwashing was, I was affected by it. BP says, "Oh, we're really good. We're doing all this research. We're terrific. We're a great company." Blah blah blah. Or Exxon, never mind the Valdez and what happened. What's going on with all of the oil refineries in the Gulf and how many animals are being killed from that? It's all greenwashing. We have the technology that we could do without fossil fuels.
So when
That's
you
what we
when you
have to
say
get rid of.
greenwashing, you mean just PR, like
Yeah.
public relations, essentially, in
It's
terms like
what
green
BJ's is
public
doing
relations.
now, that they're such good neighbors and that they care for the environment so much.
Well, they're saying
People
See
don't
that,
look
and they don't
into it.
investigate anything else.
they're making it seem like it's actually going to improve.
Exactly.
Yes,
Everything.
She said it's an improvement.
And
She
if,
said that Debbie Rose said that they're making this better than what's
That
here
was
now.
what she said to us too. Yeah.
yeah.
I think I quoted that in the article
Right.
from November. I
So
was
if
like,
people don't, most people don't have time to do research. Oh, I better check out what she just said. Let me get on my computer and Google that. People aren't going to be doing that. So they hear it, and I think possibly with some people, it's like an excuse to put their conscience at rest. Oh, I know that's wrong, but oh, she said it's good, so okay, I don't have to fight that. You know what I mean? I think there's a certain amount of absorption that people have to alleviate their own guilt, because deep down people have to know how horrible
So-
this stuff is.
In addition, for the last 2 years, we've had the COVID, and everybody was staying in the house. Not everybody, but those who were lucky enough to stay home did. Their kids were on computer all day with learning school courses. And my daughter, who is a nurse, said that this year on the taxes, she's going to put down for her job. She's going to put down teacher, because she's got 4 kids that she had to teach for internet learning.
So this is like one of the last parcels of like acreage of woodlands.
18 acres, I think it was. About 18 acres.
So this is like the last bits of
Forest on Forest Avenue.
yeah.
sad.
It's sad too, because a lot of people that I've spoken with who live around here came here from Brooklyn or Queens, and they like Staten Island because it's, I could say, a little less congested. It's less congested. I mean, we have traffic, but it's not the density of Brooklyn, Queens, you know.
But we actually have woodlands here
Yeah.
still, rather than just Faber Park or Central Park or
Right,
one
more
little park, and
suburban,
that's it.
a little park. Can I share a lovely story with you talking about saving trees? This was in a video I watched, One Piece at a Time, PEACE. They were having this problem. They showed this different environmental problems. And this took place in India. And there were some very important trees that were going to be cut down near where Buddhists had their monastery. What they did, they took robes and they made each tree a priest. They put a saffron robe around each tree so that tree could not be cut down.
And that worked.
And that saved the forest. I don't know anything analogous or similar to that we could do here. What could
Because
we do?
it's not, here there's a lot more religious diversity and stuff. Like I know in India there's like not as much.
It's
There's
more
like
important.
Hindus and then there's
Yeah,
like
and
Muslims
powers
and
that be
stuff
would
like
respect
that.
that anyway. They wouldn't respect it.
So,
The only thing they respect is green, and it's not trees. It's money.
Right. I just wish there was something we could do to go in there, each one of those.
So why wouldn't they have been interested in selling the land? Like, why didn't they even give a price? What would be the motivation for that?
If they were saying that they couldn't profit from it, wouldn't that have made
that
it?
was the
that
wetland,
would have solved
right,
the
that
They
was
got
the
all
one
the
with
permissions they needed. The only problem is with internet shopping, they're not going to be here very
Yeah.
long, and we're going to lose the trees.
There's actually malls all across the country
Yes.
that are now shuttered and just like, you know, empty lots just sitting there.
What were you asking though about why didn't they sell it or why didn't they
Yeah,
build
why didn't
on it?
they
Or
sell
what were
it?
you saying? Asking
Why weren't they willing to even give you guys a price? Like,
I don't even know if the lawyer spoke to them. They said he was going to do that, but who knows if he did.
I think they gave us what the going rate was per land per acre
No,
at that time. So it's probably more now, but we didn't get it.
we didn't get a
final
price.
figure.
No, we didn't get a price. But on Mount Marissa, that property was sold 15 acres for $15 million. So it was $1 million an acre. So now in eminent domain, they don't make the price. It's market value, and the developer cannot reject it.
So in a sense, if this actually ends up going to eminent domain, they will have lost out, and having had the opportunity to negotiate with the
sell it.
price, and then they'll just be basically forced to.
And Governor Cuomo could do that for this land. He could make it eminent domain.
So how would the community get Governor Cuomo more interested?
I don't know. We've been calling a whole bunch of people. I didn't get to call today, but I've been calling almost every single day. And we had a rally in front of his New York City office. I know Cuomo, in front of Cuomo's office, and handed out all these little papers about his number and calling. So, you know, and just asking people to call. It's on the website. So, I mean, I don't know how many people are actually calling. But that's when Gabriella must have looked at least 10 different avenues.
Oh, we've got more than that.
Yeah.
We've done so much.
Higher ground,
Yeah,
waterfront
I did
alliance.
a lot of networking throughout the country. In fact, one of the reasons that we took the 4 months to file the appeal from the time we were rejected for the public hearing to the time we had to provide these, because our first lawyer withdrew. And she told us we had 4 months to apply for the appeal. And when we finally found another lawyer, it took a long time. I went to, I've got networks all over the country. We went to Florida. There's the Anthropocene Alliance. Their initiative is called Higher Ground. They've got flood survivors from 26 states in this network. And they found us, they're in Florida and in Mississippi, and they found us a lawyer in New York, because we couldn't. And so by the time I gave all the documents over to the new lawyer, by the time he learned what was in them, by the time he put together the case, it was just before the 4 months. And then we had the thing that was only 30 days.
Did you tell them, Gabriella, about what you suspect about that first lawyer?
No, not going to say that. Okay. So we don't have proof.
So with regard to the 30 days, there was no clue whatsoever that might have even been the case where you could have said to the attorney, file a motion just in case they're going to say it's like you don't have any time.
It's not even on the radar.
Because the lawyer had said 4 months, you got 4 months.
Which you were supposed to, and it's just like a special exception that they made that...
Right.
But I don't even know if they say what the exception is. 4 months is on their website. They have certain circumstances. What's the circumstance? Why was this circumstance here? Why was this wetland coming under the statute of limitations?
So does this tie in at all with, let's say, activists who deal with like equity or things like that? Do they see this as significant to, like, let's say, underprivileged people?
This is an environmental justice community. 60 to 70% here are people of color, black and brown people from all over the world.
But it's also income that makes them an environmental justice
over here on the east
even,
side
even
of the
the
wetland is the environmental justice, but on the west side of the wetland we have the mobile home community,
right.
in which they're elderly, disabled, and low income, and survivors of Sandy.
I think it's the only mobile home park in the whole New York State. Or New York
the city. Yeah, or mobile home community.
and they tried to get rid of it at some point
Really?
years
Well,
ago.
we started. I'm taking it really, really slow. We've got a grant actually to talk to them about planned managed retreat. That right away. So I've met with several people over a period of time, and COVID really made a dent in that. I mean, it really stopped us with that because we couldn't really. But in any case, just a couple of days ago, I went to visit one of the families there, and I started talking to them about the weather, about climate change. What do they think about that? And I asked them if they were flooded during Sandy, and yes, they were. Depending on their elevation, they were more flooded than in other places. And so, actually, they said that if it comes to that, they're not going to leave. They're not going to leave. And then I went to another one. This was a while ago, before COVID, and we were handing out flyers for an event. And I knocked on the door, and this very elderly man took a long time to come to the door with a walker. And he took a look at me, and he started to yell, "Go away, leave me alone," which was fine. I didn't care about that. But I know that if there is an evacuation order, he's not going to leave. And people are not going to pick him up. This country, this city, this state does not care that people can't leave. Sandy on the South Shore, I was working on the South Shore in Midland Beach before, during, and after Sandy. And people were leaving supplies, water, diapers, cat food, whatever it was, on each corner. And I found a place that would take donations. And FEMA and the Red Cross didn't come for 2 weeks. Occupy Sandy came to help people. When FEMA and those people came, and they took a big parking lot, and that's where they were. The food and things, supplies, were not in the corners anymore. You had to go way down to that parking lot
Miller
to
Field,
get your
right?
supplies. And I said to the FEMA rep, I said, "What happens with the people who are disabled?" "Oh, there are no disabled people here," he said.
Oh.
That's what he said.
House and wetlands, forest,
Lovely.
and then a developer just came in. He wouldn't sell. He said, "I'm not selling." So you literally could reach across and shake hands with the windows of the townhouses they built.
And it created problems too, sewage problems.
There were sewage problems too because he had a septic tank, and they were like, "We don't need to know where it is. We're fine." They smashed it open. Sewage everywhere, and they didn't tell the buyers who bought the house. They didn't really remediate it either. They just let it go back in the ground, and so whoever bought that would have had that toxicity in their backyard or front yard.
There's no disclosure law in New York State. You don't have to disclose if you sell your house and you've been flooded. You don't have to tell the buyers in New York State. But I was going to say too that Hurricane Sandy.
Thinking about flooding. Anyway, it's getting kind of late.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you both for your time.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. And hopefully there'll be some solution to this. I mean, it has to be soon because.
Oh, can I just mention what it was? In the beginning, we met with Debbie Rose, council member Debbie Rose. In the beginning, we met with her 2 or 3 times. And once it was with the developer and the architect. And the architect said, no, I mentioned that we were not concerned about hurricanes and flooding because I had just been through the flood in the South Shore, Hurricane Sandy. And the developer said, there are no hurricanes up here, it's only in the South. We had been through Sandy, only in the South. New York is a prime hit for hurricanes. The pattern of hurricanes, the South, yes, but it also hits New York.
Nor'easters, they're called.
Not only that, you know, if it stalls over the water, the wings go through the whole thing, sometimes from New England to Florida.
So we've always gotten hurricanes that become tropical storms by the time they came up here. I think Hurricane Irene was supposed to be bad and it wasn't, and then Hurricane Sandy was a total fluke. Like that, I don't know if that had ever happened here.
You know what I had heard about that, Sandy? Like if you picture the map and it's coming up the coast, and because so much ice, this is from a person in NOAA, has melted from Greenland, that storm normally would have taken a right turn and gone back to the ocean. But because of the airwaves and the flows and the currents and so much of the Greenland ice has been melting, it took a left turn.
But you know what it was also? It was also the fact that it was a perfect storm. That there was no rain there, that it was a full moon, full high tide. As I said, the tide came up to the promenade in low tide. So what would high tide be like? And then there was a storm surge. So it was a perfect storm. And people are very foolish to think it's only going to happen once. It's not. And that's the thing about climate change too. You never know what's going to happen. Now, the flooding here could happen in 5 years, could happen tomorrow. We don't know because climate change doesn't tell you.
And actually, when did we ever get flash flooding alerts every time there's a storm?
Yeah.
When did we ever have tornadoes?
Yeah.
No,
Real tornadoes where they're like, go in your basement or do whatever you're supposed to do. They're like, do what you're supposed to do in a tornado, and I'm like,
Yeah, we were like,
what are you supposed to do?
This isn't something we know about.
I screenshotted that too. I was like, yeah, what do you do? Like, we don't live in Kansas. I don't know. What do we do? I never went to Kansas. What are you supposed to do? Yeah, you go into the bathroom, or you go into your basement, or you stand under a door jamb. But
and straight line wind, and that's real. That the trees come down, the ground gets so wet, the trees fall down more easily.
I actually took pictures. There were the tornado last summer. There were hailstones this big, literally, in Westerly.
I remember that.
Hailstones, like. And actually, the funny thing was, I was recording it on my phone, and there was this, one of our neighbors had gone on vacation, and the hail set off their alarm. It was on for 2 days. Was it 2 days or was it 3? Finally, the fire department came, basically broke into the back of their house and ripped out the wires. Because we were like, we couldn't sleep, we couldn't think, we couldn't do it. It was so loud, and it was from the hail.
That's what you call big hail.
It was huge. I was just like, what, you know, and like that's another thing. It's like, we don't get hailstorms.
Now, remember the bus that got flooded on Richmond Terrace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There's no floods on Staten Island?
I mean, now, if you have, you know, when you've lived in your house for 20 or 30 years or whatever, now all of a sudden, every time there's a big storm, you've got water in your house because you've also got flash flooding going on.
Yeah.
You never had that before. Like, you never had water coming in seeping in your basement because there was so much water that it just has nowhere to go. Like, these are just unusual things that are happening more and more.
We had torrential rains twice a week. Mm-hmm. You could count on it. Twice a week, torrential rains. All came down here. Now, this summer, we have rain bonds.
Yeah, where it's just like
Lightning,
really fast
thunder,
and that's it.
A lot of rain, like somebody in the sky dumped a pail of water on you, and then it's over in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Have we ever had so much flash flooding? Mm-hmm. Germany, Belgium, how many different states?
China just the other day.
Flash flooding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, what
a
are
lot
they
of
doing in
people lose their
California?
lives
Going
because they
elsewhere.
just get swept away.
Yeah, and they can't, swimmers. It's not a matter of whether they can swim or not all the time. And we've never had flash flooding like that. Never. They were showing on the news someplace in Nassau County, some community with the cars, the water was up to here, and they never even had that ever. One of them said, I've lived here for 25 years, I've never seen anything like this. The police had to come and tow the cars away. So it's kind of like, what is that story like if you put frogs in a pot and turn up the gas slowly, turn up the heat slowly, you can cook them. But if you take a frog and put it in boiling water, they'll hop right out. It's kind of like there's this slow burning that we're all going through. And it's so extreme, and we're so good at adaptation, which is a beautiful skill sometimes, but we're adapting to these changes without doing mitigation. I mean, some people are doing it, but some people are just accepting the changes without realizing that we have to do mitigation. Or when the planet will be here, but life won't.